And may I say, it's a pleasure to be back again. I've had the honor to associate with IMI at various points along the track, starting with being one of the independent observers for the second and third call way back. So it's fascinating and exciting to see how the whole project is evolving. So thank you. So if I could invite, actually, since I have a microphone on my head, my four panelists to join me on stage. Let me first very briefly introduce everybody. Well, so Hugh Laverty, Director of Scientific Operations here at IMI, you of course know already well. Sanjoy Dutta is Assistant Vice President for Translational Development at the JDRF, which is the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. Claire Skentelbery, I've got to pronounce it right, is Secretary General of the European Biotechnology Network and also involved in IMI as part of the Enable Consortium. And Rijnders is Scientific Director at Ligature and also head of the European Lead Factory Screening Centre. Now, this panel is said to be about why get involved. I think it's probably also about how best to get involved in IMI. And we're very lucky to have a group of panelists who have associated with IMI from various different perspectives and presumably have different perspectives on that association. And so, to begin with, I'd like to just explore with three of them very briefly what their association is, and then we'll move into a discussion between the panelists and also between the panelists and the audience. And I think we should dedicate most of the time to a conversation between you and them. And so your questions and comments will be most welcome. But let's start by asking you, Ton, to describe your association with the IMI.
Yeah, to begin with, just one brief word on why. I'm a big believer in collaborations and the need for collaborations to get solutions to patients. And IMI is giving this great opportunity, and that's why I want to be involved in it. And I am involved in the European Lead Factory, which is a complex consortium where all the partners have to bring in their own elements, including compounds and IP, background information, as we've been just learning. And the important aspect for me there is it's a partnership. So you don't get a grant, walk away with it, and do your own research. You invest in the partnership. And we've invested in the Lead Factory in learning what the needs and concerns were of the pharma partners, the SMEs involved, and the academics, which was difficult to get a project agreement, but when we got it, it's helped us building the trust needed to fulfill this. And now we are in a productive phase, and it's wonderful to be involved.
And would you say there was any single aspect of partnership that you would identify as being the most important thing to think about when building such a partnership?
I would say trust. Because when you come together and bring valuable assets to partners that you don't know, that trust needs to be built up. And it took a while, and it takes investment to do that. You have to invest in the interest of the other partners, not just defend your own ones, and understand why they're concerned and why they want to go in a specific direction. And in the Lead Factory, we had an example because as a public consortium, we never considered to build an honest data broker informatics system that would hide the structures for the initial screens. And my initial response to that request was rubbish. Why? There is no scientific reason. Now it's an asset, because it gives confidentiality and trust for others to give their compounds to us. So trust building is really very important.
It reminds me of a thing that Nobel laureates often say, because of course there's a lot of conversation with Nobel laureates about building partnerships and trust in science. And they often say, when you're going into a partnership, don't think of what you're going to get out of the partnership, think about what you're going to contribute to the partnership.
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly the point. And therefore you have to know what the others want you to contribute. And that conversation is key to building a partnership that achieves its goals. The other big thing, of course, is delivering. if you have promised to deliver certain things, you gain a lot of trust with your partners if you really do.
Yeah. Not easy to do, but yes. Claire, would you like to tell us about your association?
Thanks very much. And I follow on very strongly from Todd in many ways. The European Biotech Network really has two associations with IMI. One, we try to facilitate the generation of novel collaborations, and IMI is a great tool to do that. And primarily there, we target how small companies can be identified, can be enhanced and enabled to be involved, because it's so hard for them to approach such large funding topics. So a lot of that work has a great aspect of helping people understand what they're going to get from IMI, not just in terms of money, but in terms of fantastic access to collaboration, managing their expectation, because IMI is very, very different than normal research programs, and it will build lifelong partnerships, but it doesn't really make anybody rich, as far as I have seen, in terms of grant monies per organisation. And so people they look at the initial very large budgets and go, oh, that's fantastic. But of course, once you spread it across a significant number of people, it's really little. So it's really about the value comes from the collaboration, and for small companies, it's helping them understand how they can participate greatly and give momentum to collaborations themselves, even though they are small. And from the other side of it, we're actually in an IMI project, the Enable project, which is fascinatingly complex and which has the aim to generate novel programs that act against gram-negative pathogens. And that adds complexity through new partners coming in all the time. So we have a role in finding and trying to persuade people to apply to join the project with exciting science. Again, managing their expectations, helping them build something that will really, really deliver for them in the long term, and their understanding that they become part of a much larger collaboration. So it is very similar in quite substantially different projects.
You've mentioned managing expectations a couple of times there. Is that the major challenge?
Often it is, but I think it's the same across a lot of different funding programs. They will see a sum of money, they will see a scientific topic, and they will see a deadline. And that's really like only 2% of what it's all about. So really, particularly for small companies, it's about managing expectations in terms of how much money, what they're going to have, the importance of making things fit very carefully to their business structure. So it's not going after every type of money, it's finding the programs that are genuinely going to add value to what you do and to which you can add value from. Because stuck in the wrong project is a disaster for most organisations, and it's particularly disastrous for small companies because they have far less wriggle room to move around in other areas. So yeah, the managing expectations, it's a timescale. Timescale is always an issue in grant management, and IMI in particular, because it's a complex process. It took us several years to get our programme from initial expression of interest to actually up and running. So you commit a huge amount of time and effort to get to the starting point. But once I think you really understand and buy the ethos of you are building a very long-term collaborative structure, then you allow small companies, in fact universities and anybody, to build something that is of maximum value. And they will do it willingly and enthusiastically then, even though it's hard work for everybody involved.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to all that. So Sanjoy Dutta, what about you? You have another different aspect of association.
Right. For those that don't know, JDRF, formerly known as Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, is a funder of research and advocacy efforts globally. We're headquartered in the US, but globally. And we are now involved with multiple IMI projects, both in the IMI 1 version or IMI, as well as now what's called IMI 2, all to try and bring the patient voice, patient needs, and patient requirements in the long term to the public visibility for addressing those unmet medical needs. So this is the main purpose why we're involved with IMI, and we think it's an excellent forum to be involved here.
And now in IMI 2, you're an associated partner. It's a new formulation, right?
Right.
Do you want to tell us about that a little?
Sure. So, JDRF has a vision and a mission to find a cure for type 1 diabetes, one of the autoimmune disorders. affecting people worldwide. And, our goal is to try and do the greatest good for the largest number of people in the shortest period of time. And we find, although the IMI and the Horizon 2020, the European Commission doesn't state this in exactly so many words, I think their mission is also the same, to try and have the best health outcomes in the shortest time possible. So here we have signed up as an associated partner here. We are also working in a funding capacity, providing research dollars as well as in-kind contribution here to support this project along with other FPR partners in the IMI consortium.
And why did you decide to take that route?
So as I was indicating, and I completely agree with my co-panelists here, the platform that IMI provides is very unique. It brings together different areas of expertise, not just researchers, not just industry or small biotech company, regulators, reimbursement agencies. And this kind of a platform provided here is for a common cause that any individual organization will either be not able to fulfill or accomplish, or will take them eons to do so. So IMI is serving as a catalyst, providing a platform. And this unique opportunity was something that we couldn't let go by. And so we wanted to become part of this as an associate partner.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. I would like to take questions and comments. So does anybody want to start? Silence. They want to listen to you. They want to listen to you talk to each other first. So let's continue this. Let's continue this conversation of why get involved. Claire, how would you describe to your member companies why they should be involved in IMI?
Sure. I mean, I always use our Enable project as an example because there we've seen firsthand the benefits, particularly to small companies, in being involved. So putting aside the grant sum, which should be part of a whole portfolio of different funding sources for companies anyway, within IMI, you get the amazing example of basically hopefully looking all the way down the development pipeline to hopefully virtually the end, even though you might not be going there yourself in the near future. You get to see the decision-making made much further down the pipeline. In theory, people within companies should know about these things already. It's endless talk about, market awareness and commercial awareness for small companies and universities. But the reality is many small companies don't have that experience. And it changes all the time at the sort of market interface. Large companies change their decision-making strategies constantly. So it's a great way for small companies to understand how they should be thinking about their own research, what noises they should be hearing from further down the pipeline. They may never have any kind of commercial relationship with the large companies inside IMI, but the lessons that they learn and the way that things are discussed is relevant when they're looking at any form of development to market and partnership. And we've had direct feedback from the small companies that have said, the funding was in many ways neither here nor there. It was getting large company input on how you should strategically position yourself to develop something actually successfully that was massively important. And so, although they're not terribly active in the project, this particular SME I know, for them, they're really enthusiastic. They come to everything, they're involved in everything, because they understand that this is really helping them develop their own long-term company strategy.
That's fascinating. Ton, does that resonate with you?
It does resonate with me because also in the Lead Factory there is a lot of SMEs involved, and we have the additional feature that we present a platform to the outside world, both SMEs and academics, to use their innovative biological ideas to create new starting points for drug discovery projects using not only the library but also the technology and science available in the screening center to develop those innovative biological ideas into assays and then into starting points. And that's a huge learning point for both academics and SMEs, as you were saying, Claire, to understand what it takes to bring a good idea further into the direction of a solution for a patient. And they really not only love the results they get, but also the learnings and understanding of that process. So it's hugely beneficial for everybody to get involved in these large collaborative projects, because there's so much science that you're not aware of and ideas around that you don't know, that you can learn and shape your other plans and ideas for new projects.
Sanjoy, did you want to?
It's very interesting, my colleagues here coming from different organizations, and I'm completely resonating what they're saying, but coming from a patient research and advocacy organization, why we have gotten involved, in addition to the reasons I already stated. One is, with IMI and Horizon 2020's goals of solving long-term societal health issues and having bona fide outcomes there, it will take a village to solve the problem. No one can do it alone. So if not for anything else, JDRF wants to be part of this village, because we will not be able to do this alone, and neither will any individual organization. So that's a foremost reason for being involved in this. Secondly, I'd heard Tom's and your way of looking at it, what's in it for me versus what am I going to contribute to it. And there's a third way we look at it, this is a huge leverage. We look at it as multiplying our dollars. So if we put X amount of resources to it, financial and non-financial, what we're getting out of it is 20-fold, 30-fold out of it. Something that we would require 20 or 30-fold resources to accomplish if we were to do it alone. So it's the same thing, just spinning it another way, which I think resonates very well with our theme of collaborating. And finally, some of the research projects that we are involved in right now will again require a lot. We're involved in establishing cohorts. And I spoke with Natalie earlier about pediatric clinical trial networks, establishing regulatory guidelines, reimbursement policies, and something that's not even recognized today as a disease or a disease inflection point here. Some of these things will require the minds and the expertise of different people here. So there's probably multiple other reasons to be involved in a public-private partnership such as IMI, but I kind of highlighted some of the three high points that really we find it very attractive and important for us to be part of this.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Hugh.
So I'd just like to remind everybody I've got a conflict of interest. I work at IMI, so I have a vested interest in
why made us say all these things.
Why you should get involved. But I think some of the points we've heard are actually very important, not just for SMEs, not just for patient organizations, but actually for academics as well. Because one of the things we want people to see IMI as is a mechanism to drive change. So it's not just about good science, it's not just about having good publications, it's actually about having an impact and driving change both in the way we do pharmaceutical research and also driving change in the way we deliver healthcare. So a lot of what I'm hearing from the panel, I think also applies to the academics, the research institutes, and if they are thinking of coming to IMI, again, it's not just about the money, it's actually about being part of that collaboration that's going to drive change. And I think when you actually have that attitude, you actually bring a lot more energy and a lot more drive to the projects, and we can generate a lot more results.
We have some questions over here, if we could bring the microphones over, but just as an aside, do you actually, from your position, do you think you actually have to tell people why get involved? Or, I mean, is there any reluctance out there?
Yes.
There is.
People are quite scared sometimes when they see IMI because they think we're so big and we're quite scary, and pharmaceutical companies have an agenda. We see it with continually having to repeat our IP policy. So our IP policy is flexible so that we can do different things, have different models, achieve different goals. And we have to keep reminding everybody that the IMI office is there to facilitate the collaboration and to build the trust and allow everybody to work together as equal partners. And I think there are some misconceptions in the wider scientific community, and we can never do enough to be as transparent, to communicate, and to engage with all the potential partners and explain to them why they should get involved, because I am biased, I do have a conflict of interest, but I do think it is a unique opportunity to drive that change that I was mentioning before.
But I can confirm that that lack of trust at the start is really there, and it makes it simply more difficult to get projects started, because you have to overcome it before you come to an agreement on a project agreement. Therefore, these explanations that Magali has just given is really a good thing to consider before you apply. And I would really, really advocate to all academic groups to involve their legal people right from the start, because it delays a lot. And so it's right, Hugh. I do see a lot of reluctance in academic groups. They say it's too complicated. And because you want to serve all interests,
Sure.
it inevitably becomes a bit complicated. If you don't, then there's other parties who don't want to join or give their background or whatever. So that's a problem.
Just to follow up on that, if these problems and challenges were easy, we would have solved them already. And so we have to find new ways of working together. And again, it comes back to communication, building trust, and having everybody contribute, because we can, a long time ago, I used to say in my presentations, one pharma company can no longer do everything by itself. And that's even more true nowadays. It's not just one pharma company. You need patient organizations, regulators. You need the research. You need every aspect involved to try to make it happen.
Thank you. We have some questions coming, so please. Yes, but is this microphone on? Yeah.
Can you hear me in the back? Yeah, okay,
That's-
it's working. I mean, it's an interesting conversation, of course, and we are hearing all your arguments from the patients, the SMEs, and the academics. I think it will be really interesting for the audience to get real examples. Why getting involved? Because I get something out of it. So, Ton, for example, if you just tell us, I'm not sure everyone knows what the European Lead Factory is. Just briefly what it is and what it has delivered already, because I think that's what people are looking at. So you mentioned what is it for the patients and why it's there. A little bit more specific, and say, otherwise people would say, those are aspirational goals. Everybody would agree, but it's not just an aspirational goal. This is delivering, and it's actually the only way you could get to. Hopefully you are going to tell us about some deliveries, but so is there anything from the European Lead Factory that you can share?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it is indeed all about delivery and not just aspirations. So the European Lead Factory started out by combining compound libraries of 7 pharma companies. And that in itself was unique, that the companies are willing to share their compounds and share them amongst themselves for projects, but share them with the wider scientific community in Europe. So what we do in the Lead Factory is we have this library. We complement it with a public library of unique compounds that can't be found anywhere else. And we make this library available for everybody with a great idea for a new drug target. And we have a process of selecting the best ideas, and then we run them through. Now, we've run a couple of them through the screening process, selecting compounds, building out those compound classes that we have identified towards some really interesting compounds with very great properties. We've had the initial spin-out companies based on that already. We have the initial discussions between what we call program owners, who are not part of the Lead Factory, but externals, and who now negotiate with the pharma partners on collaboration on these projects. So we are bringing together innovative ideas from the outside world into the Lead Factory, combine it with our unique data of a compound library, and get the results in the hands of the academics and SMEs who came with the idea in the first place. And those ideas are now addressing things like ALS, diabetes, oncology, true needs that are societally relevant, including some neglected tropical diseases and other infectious diseases. So we see a stream of successful projects coming out and being progressed. And that's exactly what we were meant to do.
I can follow that up with a really practical example, because Enable is very lucky in that a project designed to make things and produce them. So the organizations that actively join Enable with interesting early stage anti-infective programs get a small amount of money themselves, but also basically launch is what very often a very early stage anti-infective program into a much larger development engine. So their program is reviewed every 3 months by people that really know what they're talking about and get given a pretty tough time in the portfolio management committee meetings. But they know that what they're doing is genuinely unique. It is getting the most rigorous scientific review from people that have been in the business for, you know, their whole careers. And what they're going to come out with at the end is a highly licensable, marketable, partneringable program that means, you know, novel anti-infectives are most likely to progress. And the great news is that with programs in Enable, we've built a very close relationship with the CARB-X program launched from the US, which now allows more funding to be ploughed into later stage development. And it means that people from Enable was really, it was fantastic to see the alignment between those two. Because Enable is small compared to CARB-X. But now that CARB-X is launched on a much higher scale from the US, it means that those programs have a much greater chance of then progressing further. So it's really practical, patient-facing developments.
And just to add, it was a great question actually, and that is the crux of having all of these things, is the deliverables here. For JDRF and the projects we're involved in, it's a little too early to say that we have achieved the deliverables because we are barely into the first year, but although we have signed up in 3 or 4 projects here. However, we're hoping that, you know, if all stars are perfectly aligned, the delivery will include things like establishing a clinical cohort database, clinical trial guidelines for childhood onset disease. Right now, the regulatory guidelines for intervention in a pediatric population without intervention in an adult doesn't exist, simply doesn't exist. So and with the involvement of EMA, now with FDA and an advisory capacity and very engaged in definitions of hypoglycemia, as was highlighted by one of the IMI presenters earlier on, these are things that we're hoping to deliver in the immediate term. And then in the longer term, with a sustainable model, probably there'll be more deliveries coming in, like quick testing, rapid testing of mechanistic clinical trials, which do not happen today because there's no pathway for it. So fingers crossed we'll be delivering on those.
Thank you. Please.
I'm Barbara. Sorry, is the mic on? Yeah. I'm Barbara Freisham from EBE. My question is more shifting the discussion from why to get involved to how to get involved. Are the research consortia always firmly established by the time they submit the proposals? Is there opportunities to find additional partners later on in the process, or how does it practically work for any interested party?
Hugh first and then Claire.
So I always say that actually finding the successful consortium is one of the biggest challenges that an applicant faces. Our experience has been that I think that on the whole, if you look at successful applicants in terms of consortia, they already have a core of well-connected, internationally renowned experts. So we are often approached by organizations once we've launched a call or just before a call deadline saying we're really interested in this, we would like to join a consortium. And it's very, very difficult at that late stage. One of the things that we had an NCP, National Contact Point training workshop this morning, and we were talking about this exact issue. How can we get people, entities involved into successful applications? And the thing is, there's no avoiding doing the donkey work, which is going out, building your networks, building the collaborations, been involved in small-scale consortia, and then you will have that advantage when a call is launched in Alzheimer's or whatever. Now, sorry, it is possible to join a consortium later, but it has to be scientifically justified, it requires an amendment, and unfortunately, there's no additional funding. So if you want to receive funding by participating in an IMI project, you need to be in the winning consortium at the beginning.
Can I just, but, I mean, presumably it is important to be able to involve people late, because one of the objectives of IMI was to bring people in who had never thought about this problem before, or not, maybe that's exaggerating, but at least had a different perspective and perhaps weren't involved in the networks beforehand, and it's that new thought which is also important, isn't it?
So I will just finish answering the question about how to get involved, because there are different Fit for Health, there are different platforms that can be used, but they should be used, I think, well in advance as a way to identify potential contacts. And so the German NCP has one, we have a partner search tool as well. So there are different ways that you can try to find. You can get involved in the webinars, because we will circulate the list of everybody who attends a webinar. So at least you will know that those other people are interested in the topic as well. Regarding your point about involving other people later, I mean, we have different mechanisms. So Enable and the European Lead Factory are able to run these open competitive platforms where third parties that are not part of the project can actually come and can actually get involved. So there are different ways that the calls can be constructed, but in terms of being in there, you know, setting the full proposal, it's much better to be involved at the beginning.
But I think it would be great if more IMI projects would open up that opportunity, because I think both in Enable and in the Lead Factory, it is a great experience to interact with the wider scientific community, and questions like yours can then be addressed in a different way. And I do think that projects really benefit during their progression from additional input, from expertise that is available.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, because Enable's really worked because it's provided a platform through which very small companies can apply to do something and become involved.
Yeah.
So it would be great to see that type of engine created in other scientific areas as well. You know, it's complex to run, there's no doubt about that, but more small companies have been able to bring their anti-infectives into development than if we'd had to find them all at the beginning and nobody else was allowed in.
Thank you. Can I just take a question here? Yes, you have a microphone,
Yes.
so go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
So, Wen Hua Li from Oxford. I'm a big fan of IMI, especially because it brings very different groups together, as many people have already pointed out. So my question to the panel would be, from all these interactions with different stakeholders, if you like, which are expanding, right? That universe is expanding. Can you actually tell us a little bit more about moving your project from the initial strategy to the next steps? For instance, I can imagine that Sanjoy you at JDRF have joined the IMI looking a lot on the clinical side, but of course you have also interest in early stage drug discovery, for instance, right? So whether joining the IMI actually gave you interesting insights on how you can do better drug discovery or early stage development, and of course that goes to the rest of the panel.
Right, so absolutely. So first of all, that question was a great question, and I do have a recommendation for IMI, which we'll get back to later on. But to answer directly your question here, I can give you a couple of examples. One is an earlier stage of discovery, staging of disease, staging of pre-disease. So that is one of the things we're very interested in, staging pre-type 1 diabetes. And first of all, getting universal acceptance that pre-type 1 diabetes is indeed a disease. So it's not a question of if you're going to develop the disease, it's a question of when you're going to develop a disease. So we are heavily into prevention right now. And in IMI, in the project, it's allowing us to, first of all, clinically, stage and have interventions for earlier stage of the disease, but also to establish earlier preclinical models, drug discovery paradigms with the FPI and small SMEs involved here, bringing new imaging technologies and other tools required into this village, as I was referring to move our, to get to our end goals here. So that definitely, and one other quick example is with the definitions around hypoglycemia, which is a call topic to be launched shortly, also presented earlier today, is there's a lot of unmet need, but one of the things we're hoping that the applicant consortia will come up with is models for defining these hypoglycemia, early prognostication and detection of vulnerable individuals, etc. So absolutely, we have both discovery paradigms as well as clinical opportunities here. But I just want to make a comment, Adam, to the excellent question that the lady there asked here. There is opportunities IMI offers for additional members to join once a project has initiated, and although complex, it's possible. However, I do have a recommendation, and I'm not going to say I have a solution in mind, but when a call topic is out there and applicant consortia are organically growing and applying, if there is a forum to make it available on the web without divulging any of the confidentiality there, as to at least the title or a lay abstract of that particular consortia and the tentative members in that, and then reading that, a completely new SME or an academic who is not probably as savvy with that family of applicants to be able to join, because I think it's much better earlier on if people join and join the train rather than add on later on. So that's just a recommendation.
It's a great point, and it's something that is raised time and time again, how to make sure you've got the right members in your consortium. But one of the things we as an IMI office have to be careful about is conflict of interest. And so we have to try to treat everybody fairly. So we can definitely look in whether there are different mechanisms that could be used to try to get that information out there. But we have to be transparent, and we have to be fair to everybody.
Thank you.
And at the end of the day, we have to admit there is a limited amount of budget. So you can't have 500, or it wouldn't make much point to have a huge unmanageable consortium with tiny amounts of budget. So we really have to try to balance it. So.
Okay, Claire, and then you. Yes, just one.
We spend a lot of time trying to build consortia from unlikely places, because that's sort of the aim of the game in the network. And Barbara's question is completely correct. Putting aside entry into existing projects, what players have to consider is that it's almost impossible to get into an existing consortium unless you have something incredibly unique that you are going to bring that adds value. You'll be one of a number of organizations that could bring something similar. So what we always say is, like, obviously look at the calls really early. If you are too small to be a coordinator, that doesn't stop you from driving a process. So a lot of our small company members will drive the process, even though they won't end up as a coordinator. Because you need larger universities, you need somebody who can manage a cash flow of, 100 million euros. And most SMEs, unfortunately don't have that. So drive the process, but it involves work. It needs proactive, good ideas, constant driving. It'll probably consume 3 or 4 months of your life doing it, but that is what you have to do to be competitive in the final consortium. Always be in contact with key opinion leaders, but don't be afraid to go with interesting new people growing up, because somebody who's been around and is fairly set in their ways in their career may not be the best person to drive something where you're going to have a large, complex project which intends to move things quite dramatically. So it's usually who's done the most work earliest that looks best at the finishing line.
Thank you very much. Please.
Yes, thank you. Mara Diasen from Spain. In fact, it's part of the discussion, because one of the things that I see is that not always the agendas of the industry are aligned with the agendas of the researchers, right? So the interests may not be exactly aligned, and this makes that sometimes we are losing opportunities of real translation, and there is a huge barrier in translation, as you perfectly know. And one thing that I was kind of wondering is to what extent we could think of an IMI in a more open kind of scheme, in which I know that there is this kind of bottom-up suggestions coming from the researchers, but still the final decisions depend on the interest of the industry. And sometimes they don't have all the data to really know what could be successful. And this relates, for example, the types of disorders, like neuroscience is one of the things that is not so much in the agenda because it's difficult, etc., right? So maybe I suggest that you could also consider like open a little more the kind of topics and also the kind of proposals.
Go ahead, Hugh, if you want to say something.
I think it's a really great point. We never shy away from the fact that our agenda is driven by industry, their needs, the challenges that face. They're aligned with the WHO priorities. We also have a mechanism for accepting third-party proposals, so people can make good ideas and they can submit them, and we'll hear a little bit about that, an announcement about that afterwards. So we're always open to new ideas, and we'd love to hear if people have really good proposals for projects. Submit them to IMI, we'll discuss them with FPA, we'll see what we can do. But we should never shy away from that. The challenges we face are really set out in our SRA, so please make sure that you've read the our strategic research agenda, so that whatever you're suggesting is aligned with that, because otherwise we can't act on it.
Thank you. Next point, please.
Yes, my name is Salis Dimitrios. I'm also with the European Lead Factory, and I'm heading the chemistry activities. Maybe very briefly, the European Lead Factory is actually addressing exactly this question. It is helping to translate the results that come out of academia and forward integrate it to a point where it could be interesting for the pharma companies to pick it up. Because it was recognized by the IMI that this is an issue, that the academic institutions, they come to a specific point, but they cannot develop the projects further because of lack of expertise. But that's exactly the area where the European Lead Factory is really closing the gap. And maybe also to the point to the applicants. Me, myself, I set up a consortium for the chemistry consortium. I had no experience with EU projects in any form, for that matter, not even too much in national grants in Germany. Yet we won the call because, as you put it, I did all the donkey work at the beginning, put all the right partners together, and I did a lot of work searching for the partners, and that if I didn't have somebody, I called somebody in the network to try to find who could fit. And at the end, we got the draw for the call.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep, in a second, but there's one before you. Please. Yes.
Yes, I'm Patrick May. I'm from the Belgium Scientific Institute of Public Health. We discussed about the participant to the IMI project, but I would like to mention it's not only a question of trust, it's also the fact that for some public health institute, it's forbidden in their status to be involved in a project where the industry is also involved. So that's make the balance sometimes very difficult when we try to participate to a IMI project where Public Health Institute will be involved. That was the first remark. And then the second one is that IMI 1 is over now. We're talking about IMI 2. So it means that some of the IMI 1 are almost done. And so I would like to know if there is any clue or thought in IMI regarding helping sustainability of the project that are already ending.
So the IMI office tries to act as that neutral platform that enables the different parties to come together. Now, if there is a legal impediment to a party not being able to join a consortium or whatever, I'm afraid we have no way around that. That's up to the entity in their own right. All we can really do is try to facilitate and keep facilitate that collaboration. And we do have some regulators involved in some of our projects. They have built trust in using IMI as a mechanism to address some of the regulatory issues. In terms of sustainability, this is an issue we have recognized, and it's something we are working on. We hope to bring forward something by the end of this year, but it will be very much focused on not simply continuing to fund projects, but really about facilitating the exploitation or the sustainability of key results. So, but that is something we hope to announce maybe later in Q4.
Thank you.
Hugh, to pick up on the first point, I think actually the IMI is a very valuable platform to bring stakeholders like patient organizations, HTA and the industry together to create an environment where they can work. And for instance, we run also a couple of those type of projects where we try to be the neutral intermediate to build up projects that investigate how to best do that without a direct interaction between one industry and one of the healthcare providers or organizations, which would be conflicting. So I think this is a great opportunity that should be really used.
I think my point was more that we have that experience, but we can't.
If there's a legal impediment,
exactly,
you can't.
so
No, of course.
And also we don't try to force people to participate in IMI projects. It's it's up to them. It's about what they contribute. It's about their understanding. It's about what they can actually bring to the project and what they can actually achieve with the project. So we hope and we try to provide that platform that facilitates as much collaboration as possible.
Thank you. Please.
I'd like to get back to this issue of making consortia more dynamic. Right now, it's a very static picture. So you select one out of many possible consortia, hoping that you chose the best. And then you let that go for a number of years, and then maybe the results that come out can be used by others. But why not make it more dynamic? You said, for instance, okay, partners can join, but they can't be funded. I mean, why is there that limitation? Why can't you have part of the IMI budget so that ongoing consortia can apply for reasonable amounts of additional funding, maybe also the other way around, maybe allow other funding parties to top up the funding for a consortium if they come with a good idea and they can find another funding source. So it doesn't all have to come out of the IMI budget, but the idea that you have the absolute best consortium in the world and nothing can be changed to make it better, I think is a bit counterintuitive. I think if you give more flexibility to the consortia, and it could also go that some partners may decide to leave the consortium. So it shouldn't be necessarily one way, only people forcing in, but some people may just decide, okay, after 2 years, this is not really what I thought. So, it could be more dynamic, and there's some examples of where that worked. I'm, of course, aware that it cannot necessarily work for every possible topic, but certainly for some topics, I think more flexibility could actually be an advantage.
We do have certain flexibility. Partners can join and they can leave. There are certain legal requirements that they have to fulfill in terms of their reporting. We are bound by our regulation. So I'd just like to remind everybody that IMI does not set our regulation. We are the PPP between the European Union and the pharmaceutical industry. So we have a set of rules that we have to try to implement. Having said that, there are opportunities for consortia to change. There are ways in which a new partner could join and receive funding. Maybe the funding could come from an FPA company. There are different options on the table, but actually the baseline of everything is the consortium agreement that is signed when the project starts. So that sets out all the provisions related to who does what, who's responsible for what, intellectual property rights. And if you've been working on a project for 2 years and you've made great success and you've worked, given your heart and soul to it, and then you have lots of people go, oh, that's really interesting, I'd like to join when it's up and running, when all the problems are sorted out. You also have to take into consideration the project partners that are there, and we have to respect them as well. So I think your point is a good one about how can we build in flexibility, but then again, it's about respecting the partners that are there, their contributions, and as well, fitting within our regulation that comes from the European Union.
I think the structure of Enable was designed to be very flexible right from the beginning. So that project doesn't have 100% of the budget allocated to very specific partners for very specific tasks. it foresaw lots of new partners joining. It had to design a mechanism by which that would happen. So there's no reason why lots of IMI projects couldn't build that level of flexibility in now. It's not an impossibility.
But the thing is, that's built into the consortium agreement.
Like
So-
it is in the lead factory.
Like it is in the lead factory.
Fundamental design.
Maybe it's something that we can reflect on for future projects, that this is maybe something that would be more useful way to run some projects in specific areas, but I think you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, very patient. Please.
Thank you. Del Guerra from the University of Pisa, Italy. I'm kind of looking at the future. You know, I came here to learn, and I learned that the system is working very well. Unfortunately, most of the topics is addressing is not the topic of the community that, in a sense, I'm representing, that is medical imaging developer. So I heard this morning at the very beginning in the introductory lecture presentation, this idea that IMI will extend its way of handling to other topics. And in fact, I'm very curious to know what's your strategy to try to implement the diagnosis and therapy from instrumental point of view and to put under this umbrella that seems to be working very fine. So what's the future of EMI? Because at that time, I know why I will get involved. Now I'm kind of hesitant.
So Hugh, why don't you just very briefly?
I'm not quite sure I fully understood the question. So.
I took the question, I may be wrong, but I took the question to be that if you're, basically, if you're interested in one area that isn't currently covered, yes, how is it going to develop in the future? In this case, it's medical imaging. It could, yes, be something, although medical imaging has been talked about.
So I think the thing is, if you have an idea or if there is an association that you are representing, then they should come and they should actually come to IMI, talk to FPA, and we can begin to explore whether the ideas or the area that you want to develop can be incorporated under a future project, a future plan. Maybe you want to come on as an associated partner. There are many different options, but I think the thing is that you should come to us, make yourself known, and propose your ideas.
I think there is many projects already around that have the word biomarker in there.
Yes,
and I can't imagine that there is
we have imaging
biomarker imaging project without imaging. So
yes, but we have imaging projects as well. But
yeah,
I think this goes beyond a specific project into maybe investigating whether we could have more of a platform or a strategy in this direction rather than it coming on a project-by-project basis.
Please, go ahead.
Matthias.
Could you bring the microphone, please? Excuse me. They might not hear at the back, so yeah.
Maybe just one short point. Matthias Gottwald from Bayer and also chair of the IMI operations group at FPA. If you are in a mid-sized or a bit bigger company already, there is another opportunity of driving these projects, and that would be to become a partner of FPA. We have created, under IMI2, a new membership category called Partners in Research for healthcare IT, imaging, medical device companies. And there you can join and can initiate projects where you then reach out to the pharma companies to help, and that could also be an alternative for moving up a new topic, which you are then leading. But as you said, we also will have imaging topics, and we already have a few. Probably, maybe too few, but it's on the radar.
Okay, thank you. Suddenly no hands. People want their drinks now.
Maybe if I may just make one comment,
you may.
Just as an additional aspect, and Ton mentioned it briefly also in one of his remarks. If you consider, shall I really enter such a big consortium and share my valuable thoughts and knowledge with all the others, you should also think that about the companies. And just realize that 50% of each IMI project consortium is consisting of pharma companies, and these companies have made, over the last years, this huge step of directly working with their biggest competitors and sharing all their knowledge, all their views in these projects with their direct biggest competitors. and with all the other public partners in the consortium. And this, I think, is one of the big values I see. So it's not only sharing your valuable knowledge with all the others and with the pharma companies, it's also getting access to a huge wealth of and breadth of information, of knowledge from the pharma companies that they are willing to share on a broad scale without too much limitation.
That's the leverage I was talking about. You know, the way you look at it is what you're contributing to the success and what the amount, it's not just financial leverage, it's a huge knowledge bank leverage here.
So, as a sort of closing question, I wanted to ask you all, if you were starting again, what would you most like to have known before you came into this project? Sanjoy, what about you?
Too many things, yeah. I think the importance of strong leadership and project management. It is very difficult to have two investigators or one investigator and one pharma, and we fund all investigators, pharma companies, small, large, medium, everything. It's very challenging to get two people to work together. And in these consortia, you require 25, 30, 35 member institutions working together. So extremely good leadership and strong project management skills is pivotal for the success of I think, any of these consortia. Probably there's more, but I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Sanjoy.
If I take a step back to the choosing which IMI topic you might apply to, is look very carefully and pick your fight wisely. Opportunistic application for IMI projects will just send you to an early grave. So find something that really will suit what you want to achieve and then put a lot of effort into achieving it. Just asking to join somebody's consortium is not doing the groundwork required for a successful fight. So pick your fights wisely and then fight them really hard.
Good answer.
So what I would have liked to know beforehand when we were picked as a consortium for the screening center and then first met our pharma partners, is really that also amongst the pharma partners, there were different opinions and different ideas on how to progress this project. And it had a huge impact on the final description of work, which was significantly different from what we submitted. And I thought what I submitted was what we were going to do, and that was a mistake.
Thank you. Hugh, let me ask you the question, but differently. What do you most wish that people applying for these projects knew?
Without wanting to be too flippant, some applicants, it would help if they actually read the topic text. Once they actually got past the amount of funding that was available, because that would save quite a lot of time. I think it comes back to what something I said earlier on. I think what applicants need to do is they need to not be thinking about the money, but actually be thinking what the project is trying to achieve. And if they really focus on what sort of partners they want to bring into a consortium to achieve the objectives, if they think about what they can actually get in addition to the funding, then they have a much greater chance of success, because we have a very harsh or a high attrition rate, to quote the pharma, when it comes to our short proposals, because we only take one forward. And we want people to be as successful as possible when they apply and also when the projects have started. But I think people need to understand and realize IMI is not Horizon 2020. It's about driving change. And if they read the text, if they understand the objectives, and they want to be part of driving that change, I think they're halfway to being successful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much indeed. So the session was called Why Get Involved? And I mean, given the list of call topics that was put up earlier, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's such a brave and bold enterprise. why not? How could you not want to? Yes, anyway. But thank you all for a very illuminating and lively discussion, and thank you to the audience for taking part so energetically. And I just want a round of applause for everybody.